On Ticker, this is Import Export with Lawrence Christophels.
Good morning everyone, welcome to Import Export here on Ticker TV. I'm your host Lawrence Christophels. Today's show is all about government grants and funding, as well as compliance and auditing, and how these type of tools can really help companies re-emerge as part of this lockdown situation. So we've got a fantastic lineup of guests throughout today's show, and we're going to really keep you up to date with some what's available to you, how it applies to compliance, funding, grants, and all those type of benefits that you may not be aware of that you should be tapping into. First and foremost, I'm joined by Rita Triari from William Buck. Hi Rita, thanks for joining me.
Thanks Lawrence.
Great, so before we kick off, Rita, please tell me a little bit about William Buck and what the operation does, the organisation does.
Well, basically we are a professional services firm offering services across a broad range of areas. We've got divisions in tax and R&D tax incentives, which is my area, business advisory, corporate advisory, wealth advisory, recoveries and insolvency, and audit.
Great. So as we emerge, Rita, out of this situation, so many companies now have got a lot of pain, but it's also created some opportunities where manufacturing is such a big focal point now. And your expertise, your specialty in R&D, can we talk about that? How important is R&D for Australia in general as we re-emerge and try and redefine ourselves on a local and global scale?
Well, really important. So the Australian Bureau of Statistics estimates that 72% of businesses will be impacted because of the COVID-19 situation, so that all experiencing cash flow shortages. So unfortunately, the whole COVID pandemic has created an uncertainty in relation to our economy. And so because of this, it's sort of hard for companies to implement long-term business strategies. And so it is imperative for government to provide support in relation to R&D to help them continue to grow and innovate during this difficult time. Also, history has shown that during the Great Depression and the recession of the 2007 and 2008 has resulted in companies who did invest heavily in R&D during those periods of time did actually do really well, even through those difficult times.
I think the other thing that's really powerful and important about R&D is that the whole sense of global supply chains has shifted back to national supply chains. We've seen the risk of relying too much on overseas markets for supplies. So companies now and the country as a whole is really looking back inwards and saying, well, let's increase our capability, increase our technology and our capability to produce back in-house again. Is that something that have you received more inquiries about that over the last month? I know companies are only just starting to sort of re-emerge recently, but...
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's obviously that shortage in deficiencies in the supply chains and onshore manufacturing capabilities. And we've seen that the government is looking to support those areas. For example, the AMGC, which is the Advanced Manufacturing Growth Centre, has established, in collaboration with the government, a COVID-19 manufacturer, I forgot the word.
Like a rebate or something? Or?
No, so it's actually, they can sign up and basically it matches companies or manufacturers that are looking to manufacture products with companies looking to find those products.
Oh, okay. So like
matching the demand and the supply.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, that's really important because I know that there's people like ICN who are doing similar things like that for major projects, but if it's on a smaller scale where companies can really do that business matching and give them opportunities to sell here in the local market, that's powerful. So if I'm a company, Rita, how do I go about identifying, one, how I properly clearly define R&D, and then obviously speaking to experts such as yourself to see what's eligible out there for me from a government support, funding, rebates, all those type of things that are available. How do you normally engage with the client?
So basically we engage with them, we try to understand what their needs are, so we let them sort of explain what it is that they do and what they're looking for and what their intended outcomes are and what their long-term goals are. From an R&D perspective, we ask them about some of the challenges that the company is experiencing and how they're going about overcoming those challenges, because it's that process in how they overcome those challenges. So if they are implementing experimental processes to overcome those challenges to create new knowledge, then they could be potentially eligible for the R&D tax incentive. So if they're doing anything to innovate, to improve efficiencies, decrease the cost of manufactured goods, to whatever it is to help with the supply chain issues. They could be doing eligible R&D, so we will ask questions around that.
Yeah.
There's other sort of supports available, government grants, and I know that you've got a segment on grants coming up later. There's also the manufacturing modernisation fund.
Yep.
So they've had round one of this funding, so that the government has actually allocated all of its money into round one.
Yep.
And so we expect that there's probably going to be additional pot of money for the round two later this year.
Well, I was going to ask about that question, Rita, because I know in recent years R&D, the tax offset has been sort of in limbo a little bit about what the eligibility were, what funding was going to come back. Has that been clarified now? Is there more? Do companies really know, and do you guys know what people will be entitled to?
Yeah, so there has been a little bit of a myth in relation to the R&D tax incentive, and companies have been unsure about it because of all the negative press about it. However, nothing has really changed over the last 10 years since its inception in 2010. So the definition of what an R&D activity is still the same.
Okay.
But what has changed is that the honeymoon period of this newer scheme, which took over from the old R&D tax concession, has sort of come to an end, and so the regulators are sort of stepping up their compliance of the program because it is a self-assessed program.
Yep.
And so companies are continuously sort of getting it wrong and not really understanding what qualifies as an R&D activity, or not supplying sufficient detail in their applications in relation to the experimentation.
And I think that's a really valuable point that you just touched on there, Rita. I've had the benefit of watching you in action with your presentations and some of the workshops you do for industry. And I look around the room sometimes when you present and you see so many people watching and their light bulb moment goes off thinking, well, yeah, I could be claiming that stuff. And they don't realise what is actually R&D and so many missing nuggets of gold that they could actually work with you on to maximise their claim, or actually create the proper eligibility structures for themselves.
Yeah, definitely. And we encourage companies to dig a little deeper and not only sort of consider their general normal R&D activities to be R&D, but they could be doing R&D in other areas. So manufacturers could be doing R&D on their IT systems, or on their sales systems, in logistics or the warehouse. So there's other areas of R&D that sometimes is easily missed. Yeah,
well, you just mentioned logistics, warehousing, distribution. Those are often not thought of as R&D, but as you pointed out just now, it is something that especially our audience who look at importing, exporting, and the service providers who cater for that really should be getting in touch and saying, look, we might be doing some R&D, can you come and have a chat with us? So definitely think there's so many untapped opportunities for that application.
Definitely, and if they're looking to overcome technical challenges and applying a scientific procedure and process, and we can help them understand what that scientific procedure is, but it can be generally framed into an R&D activity.
Great. So what's William Buck doing as this whole re-emergence is taking place around Australia? Do you guys have events planned, webinars, or how are you sort of supporting the industry and trying to educate them to help them get back on track?
Yep, so it's basically business as usual for William Buck. We have been operating for 125 years, and we are Australia's oldest firm. Yeah. And so we have taken companies through previous times of challenge, such as wars and recessions, through all the way through to now, to the current COVID-19 situation. So we have been there along the way with our clients. We have developed a number of resources, like you've said, such as webinars, educational programs. We have a dedicated COVID-19 hub on our website for our clients and other companies to access all the information in there. And our business advisory teams and all the other teams are constantly, working with our clients to assist them through this pandemic.
Great. And finally, Rita, what do you see about, as the government's thrown all these sort of support mechanisms out, and they've got all these stimulus packages that they've just recently rolled out, there's going to be a need for more and more support over the coming months and years, really. What do you envisage may emerge as part of the R&D support as well? Do you think they might throw some other programs or increase pool or any strategies around that? Or
I know that, for example, the startup and tech community have been asking for the definition of R&D to be expanded to include software into the definitions. Currently, the software claims are quite limited. So I think, if government is listening, policymakers are listening, I'm not sure. Hopefully that could happen, eventuate in the future. Generally, unfortunately, with the R&D tax incentive, the government is looking to, to cut it slightly.
Yeah.
And so there is currently...
Hopefully that changes, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So there is, unfortunately, Industry Minister Karen Andrews has indicated that the government's looking to continue with these cuts. And so we'll find out more after December about that, unfortunately. So
great. Well, look, hopefully that isn't the case, and they see that it is so important to, especially as we re-emerge from manufacturing and try and reignite our manufacturing sectors around the country. So thanks so much, Rita. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show, and look forward to having you on again in the future as well as some of these changes evolve. So for all of you out there, if you don't know about R&D or you've heard about it but not quite sure, if you're eligible, definitely get in touch with Rita William Buck. All the details will be on our website as well. But check it out and find out what you may be eligible for. You might be pleasantly surprised. So thanks so much, Rita. Coming up after the break, we're going to hear from Jeff and Lauren Gray, and we're going to talk about the importance of audit and compliance and how that relates to not just business improvement, but how increases your availability for funding as well. So stick around, we'll see you straight after this break.
We all have a big idea.
When I was a kid, I actually wanted to be a builder. Everyone working outside, music playing.
When I was a kid, I wanted to be an ice cream man who offered free refills.
But what does it really take to be an entrepreneur?
You got to have balls.
To be a startup founder, it's definitely not for everyone. It's insanely challenging.
No, balls and brains.
A brand new show to inspire bright ideas.
Being really determined and resilient to make it happen.
The show is for people in our position, in the trenches, trying to build a brand.
The real story about startup life from the guys who founded Bay Juice.
The best day of our life with Bay Juice is when Dan Murphy's called us to say we're going to trial your product in store.
There's an insane amount of challenges, but we always see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Ticker Launch with Liam Gostenik and Tim O'Sullivan. Every week on Ticker.
Hey, good morning. Ticker's new breakfast show.
Well, most of the time in the morning, I annoy people.
I think Ben is so fabulous. He is wild, he is warm, he is witty.
The first time I met Alana, I realised I wanted to have a drink with her.
You never know what's going to come out of his mouth.
Kick off your morning with Ticker Jumpstart.
We are playing in uncharted territory.
This preparation takes me all night.
It doesn't matter how long I take, because Ben will always take longer.
Ticker Jumpstart with Benjamin Norris and Alana McLean.
You're going to get some different stuff with us, and we're going to be unapologetic for it.
You do realise it's the morning, so you don't need to be the human coffee.
There are now more ways to watch Ticker. Download our apps for Apple and Android devices. We're live on Twitter and YouTube Live. And you can catch us on Amazon Alexa and Google Home. Head to the Ticker website for more. Introducing Ticker Sport.
Mate, how exciting is it to kick off Ticker Sport?
Mate, I'm as pumped as you, which is pretty pumped. We're here to talk sport, business, there's a market, there's a niche.
It's David Davidovich and Adrian Franklin tackling the biggest issues.
Mate, we're talking sport, but we're talking business as well. And as you know, right now, there is no more important time. The world has changed and we are here to react.
Where nothing's off limits.
This is unprecedented. We've never seen sport ground to a halt like it has. Sport's heading in a completely different direction and we will be at the forefront.
Every Friday, live on Ticker and on demand via the Ticker apps.
On Ticker, this is Import Export with Lawrence Christophels.
Welcome back, everyone. You're watching Import Export here on Ticker TV. I'm Lawrence Christophels, your host. As I mentioned from the outset, today's show is all about government grants, funding and support programs to help your company grow and re-emerge out of this pandemic situation. One of the really important parts about doing that is to make sure that your systems, processes and your compliance are all up to date. So now we're joined by Lauren and Jeff Gray from Gray's Management Systems. Thanks so much for joining me both.
That's all right, pleasure, Lawrence.
Thank you.
Great. Now, I want so many questions for you, but before we kick off, tell us the audience about Gray's Management Systems and how it all came about.
Well, we started about 30 years ago, originally with an international firm, but now locally,
yep.
And was us two, plus a cohort of consultants.
Yep.
We do specialise in compliance training, auditing, consulting. We work with the regulators locally. We teach the people how to do audits and how to go out and regulate businesses. So we work with some of the big regulators, and we also have internal auditor training for people who come along to our courses in Melbourne and throughout Australia.
Yep.
and which has changed dramatically with COVID-19,
Yeah.
but you'll hear more about that later.
Yep.
And we just love what we do, and clients like our positive approach to auditing, so we see our auditing as like a health check. And if
Well, it's so important, especially as you said, Jeff, about post-COVID-19, but we had Rita on the show just earlier. People, when they're applying for funding and grants, they typically have to provide demonstrated self-audits or level of compliance or regulations. And that can be a whole range of skill set that most companies don't have. They're focusing on their widgets and their bread and butter of doing business. So to have expertise like a management systems processes that you guys can create and develop for them and teach them how to do those audits is really important. But even more so now with COVID-19, how companies need to properly have processes, systems, compliance for regulation, but also for safety for their own staff and how the supply chain works around those things as well. So, how have you found the impact of COVID-19? You just alluded to it.
It's interesting because, about 7 weeks ago, we almost didn't have a business.
Wow.
And so we had to pull together our team. A lot of the training consulting, obviously face to face. And so our team rapidly were able to bring our services to a facilitated online delivery.
Yeah.
And we've been flat out.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because a lot of our clients are from regulators, and they needed to upskill their lead auditors. So we were also able to provide training in how to, you could conduct an audit remotely. And for us, I definitely see it as being an important piece going forward post-COVID in relation to the offering of our services.
I think, Lauren, the other part is that companies who typically do audits, and you guys will know this better than me, but they identify gaps in their operations, their processes. So by working with you to create audit processes and system mapping, that can then improve and make more efficient, leaner, more profitable, which every company needs to do now. Because of the whole re-emergence, and there's not one company in the world, I was going to say Australia, but who hasn't been impacted by COVID-19. And all of us in business are forced to look at blank canvas approach. Okay, where can I save money? Where can I improve efficiency? How can I get new business, acquire new customers, or retain my existing customers? And there's nothing better than having really strong, robust systems. That old adage where if you can't measure it, you can't improve it, is what came to mind when I thought about getting you guys on the show, because it's so relevant to the grants and funding process as well.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, so how do you guys work with the industry associations? I know that you train auditors, whether it's in-house in operations, but also those industry auditors who go out to businesses. So how do you normally interact with them? How does that work?
Well, they usually contact us directly. We've built a good rapport with a number of regulators, typically Civil Aviation Safety Authority or National Rail Safety Regulator, which is a new one, Transport Safety Victoria, the blood banks in Australia, New Zealand, etc. And they have already trained up their lead auditor cohort. And from time to time they get new entrants that come along and they set us on our programs. We work for Department of Primary Industries around Australia because they've got an audit cohort that has to audit all the farms and producers, etc., to stop the import of mad cow disease. And they just like our positive approach. It's all based around ISO standards. There are ISO standards for how you do audits. A lot of regulators don't know of that standard, so we just love what we do. And as I say, it's we run public courses so people can come individually and mix with other organisations. But I think it's that compliance to ISO which gives that import-export a flavour.
I was going to ask about the international piece there, Jeff. I know that you've done some training overseas and you help a lot of, one of the things Australia's recognised for and renowned for is our green, trusted, we've got strong financial systems, we've got really trusted supply chains and trusted systems in most businesses. Many emerging markets, especially around ASEAN, don't have that luxury, so they are looking to clean up their act. They want to be able to tap into Western markets to sell their products or work with global supply chains. But for them to do that, they need to be able to make sure they can demonstrate, well, I've done the checklist, we're working with compliances, auditors, and we know what we're doing. So have you found that's increasing over the recent years as well?
Most definitely, especially in the Asian markets. They used to self-regulate. the governments used to do the audits and no one failed.
Yeah.
And they're finding they can't play on that level playing field unless they get the world-renowned certifying businesses to go and audit them to have that credibility. So by getting external commercial certifiers into those areas, they seem to be on that level playing field, and they've had to catch up and they've had to change, and it's been good for consumers like us. Yeah. So
I wonder if there's going to be any wet market audits in China. Could be a bit of a touchy subject.
Oh, there'll be a standard for that, sir.
There will be.
But those are the sort of things that have emerged out of COVID. Is that industries where you wouldn't think that they really need an audit or compliance are now thinking, well, actually, we want to get in place a really robust measurement system, management system, reporting system, because it's highlighted the importance of how you can traceability is a big part of any business now.
Definitely.
I went to a cafe for the first time after so many weeks yesterday, and you have to write down your name, take down your details, and it's a whole new experience. Everything's changed. So that leads to my other question to both of you is, I know you work with all these industry bodies on the bigger end of town and probably medium to larger businesses. Are you finding that more smaller businesses are still saying, well, I need to compete with the big boys, so therefore I need to make sure I've got my compliance up to speed and I've got the ability to demonstrate my credibility by third-party audit. But are there industries that have emerged that you hadn't sort of envisaged before?
Well, we went to a little place yesterday who supply hospital products, highly regulated. They've won a lot of business based on their reputation from the father who started up 50 years ago, and now the two sons are running the business. And they've been able to trade on their reputation until now. With all these standards coming in, they're calling for certification of ISO standards, both from the health and safety perspective, as you mentioned, the quality standards, etc., and environmental. So they just contacted us and says, this is going to be a license to be in business in the future. We need to do this. And so we went out and visited them yesterday, and just a wonderful business, family business. And it's difficult for them if there's ignorance about the standards, you see. So they're good at their commodity, but not good at compliance.
And that's a common theme, isn't it? Especially for smaller businesses, because they're great at what they do, but it's a matter of a lot of it's up here versus getting into a process and system.
And that's where we can come in and help them too, to transpose that and to make sense of the standards and translate it into their speak.
Obviously today's show is about government grants and funding. It makes logical sense to all the viewers and to myself that if you're applying for funding and you can demonstrate compliance standards, audit processes, when the government bodies are actually assessing your application, there's a huge sigh of relief, because you're not trying to, go through with the fine-tooth comb what they're really doing, how does it work, trying to marry up what their processes look like versus a grant eligibility. So I see that even when companies want to apply for funding and support, which is going to be more and more of, as we've talked about, and I think all countries around the world are trying to support their businesses reinvigorate, compliance and business process systems are going to be so critical. What's your advice to both of you for especially small to medium businesses? Our audience are typically importers, exporters, but also those service providers. You might have a courier company, a transport company, a warehouse, freight forwarder, and they've all got different compliance requirements as well, through Border Force and through occupational health and safety, all these sort of layers and layers of compliance.
I know.
But they probably may not have their own internal systems. What sort of advice would you give them?
Well, we are currently starting to work with a lot of NDIS service providers, and apparently there's we hear that there's 20-odd thousand companies that need to be approved by the NDS Commission. So they're all getting their Compliance Act together. So there's a massive demand there for auditors and compliance that was never there before. So we're seeing a lot of that. A lot of the not-for-profits, they can't get grants unless they're ISO certified or have systems in place that meet state-based regulations. But from an ISO perspective, it's actually an entry barrier into some of the markets, both up and down the supply chain. So,
absolutely. I help companies with a lot of RFQs and RFPs when they want to try and win business. And then one of the first checklists on the criteria for an RFQ is show us what your compliance and your certification is. Because if you don't pass those first tick boxes, well, you don't get past the first round when it comes to RFQs.
But it's not just about the getting into, once we're certified, it's about the ongoing compliance and compliance becoming part of your daily activities and the way you're also thinking. I think that's really important to reiterate, and also to emphasise that we understand that many businesses out there may feel quite overwhelmed with all the standards and the regulations that they need to conform to. However, a healthy, compliance check on a regular basis with your business can make things just so much easier.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right, Lauren. I think there are so many intangible benefits that come along with having the right systems and processes that the business, as we said at the outset, was. They will become leaner, they'll become more efficient, they'll actually identify gaps that they hadn't even thought of before. So it's really powerful.
Yeah.
So,
we see businesses fall into two main categories when it comes to compliance. We call them the enlightened and the desperate.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the enlightened ones can see that it's a requirement of business in the future and implement things in a controlled manner, and the desperate ones will open up the tender and say, we've got to do this by Friday. So I think a lot are in the wrong basket there, so that's slowly changing as well.
It's a great way to summarise.
That's right.
Yeah, really great, Jeff.
Yeah.
Well, look, Jeff, Lauren, it's been amazing to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining me. All of you out there, you've heard how important, how valuable it can be to actually review your business, look at the process mapping, look at your business management systems, but importantly, look at how that can open up many more business opportunities for both acquisition and retention and government grant applications by having the right audits and compliance in place. So, get in touch. Grades Management Systems will have Jeff and Lauren's details for you to share, but stick around after the break. We're joined by Tom Sandlands from around all export market development grants, the EMDG program. So we'll see you very soon after this break.
We all have a big idea.
When I was a kid, I actually wanted to be a builder. Everyone working outside, music playing.
When I was a kid, I wanted to be an ice cream man who offered free refills.
But what does it really take to be an entrepreneur?
You got to have balls.
To be a startup founder, it's definitely not for everyone. It's insanely challenging.
No, balls and brains.
A brand new show to inspire bright ideas.
Being really determined and resilient to make it happen.
The show is for people in our position, in the trenches, trying to build a brand.
The real story about startup life from the guys who founded Bay Juice.
The best day of our life with Bay Juice is when Dan Murphy's called us to say we're going to trial your product in store.
There's an insane amount of challenges, but we always see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Ticker Launch with Liam Gostinik and Tim O'Sullivan. Every week on Ticker.
Hey, good morning. Ticker's new breakfast show.
Well, most of the time in the morning, I annoy people.
I think Ben is so fabulous. He is wild, he is warm, he is witty.
The first time I met Alana, I realised I wanted to have a drink with her.
You never know what's going to come out of his mouth.
Kick off your morning with Ticker Jumpstart.
We are playing in uncharted territory.
This preparation takes me all night.
It doesn't matter how long I take, because Ben will always take longer.
Ticker Jumpstart with Benjamin Norris and Alana McLean.
You're going to get some different stuff with us, and we're going to be unapologetic for it.
You do realise it's the morning, so you don't need to be the human coffee.
There are now more ways to watch Ticker. Download our apps for Apple and Android devices. We're live on Twitter and YouTube Live. And you can catch us on Amazon Alexa and Google Home. Head to the Ticker website for more.
On Ticker, this is Import Export with Lawrence Christophels.
Welcome back, everyone. You're watching Import Export here on Ticker TV. I'm your host, Lawrence Christophels. Today's show is all about government grants, funding and support to try and help anyone in international trade, import, export, or the broader supply chain to really identify how they can get some support programs and services or government funding for their business. We've had some great guests already, but now we're joined by Tom Sandlands from Sandlands Export. Hi Tom, thanks for joining me.
Thanks mate, it's great to be here.
Tom, tell us about Sandlands Exports and how it all came about.
So it's a family-run business, similar to Jeff and Lauren, I presume, before. It was started by my father, probably around 88, so 30 odd years ago.
Wow. Yeah.
And I came on board about 13 years ago, and it's always been around the export market development grant consulting.
Yep.
And so it's basically like the easiest way to put it is like a tax advisor for the export grant, so which is administered by Austrade, and we're I think we're one of the larger consulting firms in Australia now. It is a bit of a niche market, so it's something to hold our hat on, but it's not, we're not a big four or anything like that.
No, well look, in many ways that's a plus though, because one, so many companies who are similar to what Rita was talking about with R&D, they don't know what they're eligible for. You know, I've been involved with exports for decades now, but I love the way the EMDG, you can identify so many opportunities to claim some funding around even things like the +6 one on your business cards and some, you know, little tweaks and nuances that companies typically don't know about.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you about, for the audience, for those who don't know about EMDG, maybe a quick summary of what the program's about.
Sure.
And who's eligible?
Yeah. Okay. So it's a grant. It's a reimbursement grant for partial reimbursement on marketing costs. So it's administered by Austrade. They audit. It's an audited program. It's been around for about 40 odd years, the program, and it's all reimbursement on marketing costs where a company is promoting overseas. So outside Australia and New Zealand. Having said that, there are a lot of little intricacies around the expenses. So if a company designs a new website, they can claim the cost of that website, but at a portion taking out the Australian and New Zealand part of it, because the rest of it's going, you know, for overseas viewership. So those little things. But advertising comes in all shapes and sizes, and there are set categories that Austrade do provide, and companies often just have an issue trying to find out which category it fits in. Is it eligible? Is it advertising, or is it not? And that's where we come in. So it's every company has a different way of marketing, and we sort of try to fit their peg in the right hole, I suppose. Yeah.
Tom, I know from experience dealing with so many exporters that they have tried to do EMDG claims themselves, and they really miss the boat in many ways. And I'm generalising, obviously. Sure. But what I love about the value of advisors such as yourself is that you educate and refine the way that they actually record and capture all their expenses. You go through the ledgers and you say, okay, well, yes, this is export related, this isn't. Whereas typically, you know, you come to the end of financial year, or people are trying to scramble to put their EMDG grant in. It's literally like a shoebox type scenario. Right? Yeah. So what you guys do at Sandilands is so valuable because it does maximise the claim. That's even more important because my next point I want to ask you about is the pool of funding. There is when most new exporters or people who are just starting to hear about EMDG, they think, oh, I can claim up to 50% of my export funding, but then there's a whole pool that sort of sits behind that as well. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, so you put in it, they calculate, Austrade calculate the grant minimum threshold expense of 15,000. So they calculate that grant saying that you wear the first 5,000, you get half the balance. So your minimum grant is $5,000, and your potential maximum is 150. Right. And I say 150 because in previous years there's been depending on the number of applicants and the amount of funding around that 150, 160 million in the pool at the moment, servicing over 4,000 applicants each year, it doesn't sort of fit right. So a company might be applying for 150,000, but last year's round of applications for the 17-18 year, they get their first 40,000 because that's the Austrade are comfortable in issuing that first 40,000 without going over budget. But then the rest is a bit of a lottery. The second tranche was really low at 24% in the remaining 110,000 they're expecting. So that sort of does, you have to sort of curb the enthusiasm early on with applicants saying, well, we've spent a lot, but there's no guarantee of it actually funding. So, but having said that, the COVID-19 environment now has just flipped everything on its head.
I was going to ask you, Tom, so do you see, I mean, that pool has been a contentious issue for a while now, for many years. You know, exporters have been really rallying the government in Australia to say, look, give us more support, give us more funding through that pool. Do you think that that'll emerge now after this situation?
I'd like to think so. The current Trade Minister has actually been quite receptive to lobbying for increased funding. Even prior to the COVID-19 environment, there was an investment of 20 million or 60 million over 3 years to bring it back up. It was still underfunded, but it was showed that it was on the radar. It's going to be hard to tell how many applicants are, like in the subsequent years now, will actually be applying because a lot of companies are dropping off in a way. So. So that total funding, it might be 100% anyway, but I suppose what applicants and what we're trying to push for to make it a successful grant is to actually ensure fully funding over the years coming. So as companies do increase their promotional expenses, in 5 years' time, there's comfort there that they know they're going to get that 150,000 rather than 55 or 60 that they're not expecting. So it's hard to tell. Like, bottom line, I wish I could give you an answer, but as with anything, that the pool of government funding is it's very competitive to find that. So we'll just keep on lobbying, I suppose.
Well, there's a pretty big checkbook going thrown around at the moment, so a couple of bill won't help.
Well, that's right.
throw a bit more around.
And on the back of that, exactly, a couple of billion would be great for the export market, $1 billion. But I suppose that there was, with the COVID-19, they did commit to 50 million of export grants from 18-19 year, so that actually made it fully funded, which was a big boost. And there is a commitment to sort of take away the earnings test for the current year. So that's one of the sort of parameters within the grant. It's generally about the expenses, but they bring in an earnings test after a couple of years just to make sure that you are exporting and sort of reward you sort of on an incremental basis to show that you are actually exporting and achieving some sales. So they've taken that out for the current financial year's expenses as comfort to exporters that have just shut down any sales. That's right.
So, what are the typical industries? I know obviously with Australia it's food and bev has been really traditional export sectors. What other things have you sort of come across that sort of even opened your eyes up, Tom, around exports?
Every applicant is different. It's quite interesting. We still get a lot of the traditional manufacturers and wine and beef and those sort of exporters. But I suppose there has been a shift to the IT and education services. Tourism's been a big boost the last few years. I don't know how that's going to handle the next couple of years, particularly with foreign visitors. But those IT and education ones where it's online based, it can go to the world really quickly. That's sort of. I'm staggered just to see the progress of the technology that's coming out, I'm sometimes putting in applications like I know that it's eligible here, but I still don't understand the full quota of what you're doing here, and they have an end goal in a few years' time, but they really want to promote hard because someone else in the world is actually trying to compete at the same time as well, so they really want to push hard on the advertising. That's when they sort of they bring us in. But the next 12 months, it's anyone's guess on how things will rebound. I did get a call a couple of weeks ago about a company that was producing hand sanitizers. So that's a success story already, and I don't know how much promotion they need to spend because it's actually just walking out the door. The product.
Exactly. They probably can't keep up with production.
Exactly. I suppose I still think the IT services and the consulting and engineering and those sort of ones where Australia's sort of become quite a reputable country for. I think they'll still carry on. Tourism will hopefully rebound in the next 12-18 months because there's been a lot of momentum improvement in the last 3, 4, 5 years, particularly through Chinese visitors. So I think that will still keep some momentum over the next few months. Hopefully the borders will start opening soon when it's all safe.
Yeah, great. I think you're right. There's so many new things that are on the horizon. Hopefully those traditional sectors like the tourism and education sort of revamp really quickly. So Tom, I know that companies who may not have been up to speed with EMDG, one of my experience background with ATLC, what we do with Australian Trade Logistics Corporation, is to help companies to create their export plan, and because they need one of those things as part of their initial requirements, right, to claim an EMDG, they need to have at least a basic export plan.
With the EMDG, we're finding we meet new clients at all different sort of sales, parts of the sales cycle. So catching them early is quite good, and the EMDG does swing into the export plan sometimes when they're sort of doing that marketing budget, which is so crucial once the product is ready. So following on from the R&D conversations, that the job's only half done, so they have to get to the marketing. But then at the same time, similar to a couple of clients you've been mentioning, you catch people in the experience of they've never heard of EMDG or they've heard of it, but they feel like it's a bureaucratic nightmare, so they won't actually touch it. And then there's ones that may have claimed 10 years ago and want to reinvest again, and so it comes in and out of export plans. But I think it's quite important, particularly with that just consistent funding, which every company is looking for now. Yeah,
that's right. That's what this whole episode's about, is to identify and educate them so that they've got some awareness around who to talk to, such as yourself, to say, look, put my hand up, I need some help. What can I get some support with? What funding is out there for me? So, it's really valuable, really great to have you on the show, Tom. So,
thanks, Lawrence.
What other sort of departing words of wisdom or advice would you give to aspiring and existing exporters? I think definitely to recheck, because there have been some recent changes, as you just mentioned. So get back in touch.
Yeah, it's just maybe getting back in touch, and even if things have sort of are on hold a little bit, it's actually a good opportunity to reboot for companies. So get in touch, work out which categories might be eligible, and then they can actually sort of say, okay, well, let's change our marketing, potentially online. Trade shows and things are on hold at the moment, so it's a different way of marketing, and it all comes down to just having a quick conversation initially to say, okay, well, this is what's eligible, this is what's not, and then we can move forward from there.
And Sandlands operates Australia-wide, right? So
we do, yeah.
So you've got there's no barrier restrictions at all. Any company in Australia can get in touch and speak with you.
That's right, and even if it's on Zoom or something, like face-to-face we find is the best way to actually sort of get an understanding of the business and almost do like a virtual walkthrough of a product sometimes is the best way of going about it.
Yeah, and that's, I think the greater you understand their business, their product base, the easier it is for you to help them, really.
Exactly, that's right, because we're that middleman between Austrade and the applicants, so we want to be comfortable with their application too, and sometimes find opportunities for them to grow as well. But we love being part of that growing environment with them.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Tom. It's been an absolute delight to have you on the show.
Thanks, Lawrence.
For all of you, get in touch with Tom at Sandlands Export. All these details will be on our site shortly. But if you're already in export or you're looking to get into export, EMDG is an absolute must to look at and visit through your business. So make sure you check that out. Get in touch with Tom and his team, and they'll guide you in the very right direction. So thanks again, mate.
Thanks a lot.
Coming up after the break, we're joined by Ben Cusack from Bullet Point, and we're going to talk about a whole range of different funding and application programs that he's fully across. So stick around, we'll see you after the break.
We all have a big idea.
When I was a kid, I actually wanted to be a builder. Everyone working outside, music playing.
When I was a kid, I wanted to be an ice cream man who offered free refills.
But what does it really take to be an entrepreneur?
You got to have balls.
To be a startup founder, it's definitely not for everyone. It's insanely challenging.
No, balls and brains.
A brand new show to inspire bright ideas.
Being really determined and resilient to make it happen.
The show is for people in our position, in the trenches, trying to build a brand.
The real story about startup life from the guys who founded Bay Juice.
The best day of our life with Bay Juice is when Dan Murphy's called us to say we're going to trial your product in store.
There's an insane amount of challenges, but we always see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Ticker Launch with Liam Gostenik and Tim O'Sullivan. Every week on Ticker.
Hey, good morning. Ticker's new breakfast show.
Well, most of the time in the morning, I annoy people.
I think Ben is so fabulous. He is wild, he is warm, he is witty.
The first time I met Alana, I realised I wanted to have a drink with her.
You never know what's going to come out of his mouth.
Kick off your morning with Ticker Jumpstart.
We are playing in uncharted territory.
This preparation takes me all night.
It doesn't matter how long I take, because Ben will always take longer.
Ticker Jumpstart with Benjamin Norris and Alana McLean.
You're going to get some different stuff with us, and we're going to be unapologetic for it.
You do realise it's the morning, so you don't need to be the human coffee.
On Ticker, this is Import Export with Lawrence Christophels.
Welcome back to Import Export. I'm Lawrence Christophels here on Ticker TV. Today's show is all about government grants, funding, compliance, all the ways that we can try and educate you and increase your awareness about what programs are out there to support you as you re-emerge out of this lockdown situation. No matter what type of business you are, most of you are involved with some sort of global supply chain, so listen in and check out all the people who can help you. Now we're joined by Ben Cusack, the infamous brother of the more famous Alison Cusack. I had to say that. So, but mate, you've been around a bit longer than Alison, but you're an expert in government grants. Tell us about Bullet Point and how it all came about.
Well, thanks for dropping my sister's name into my segment. So make sure you do the same back to her. So my background, I'm originally an engineer.
Okay.
And I had enough of being an engineer after about 6 years and did an MBA and then moved into management consulting and started writing business plans for startups, and writing a government grant is very similar to writing a business plan. And I felt that I could write a lot of words into a very small amount of space, which is what government grants are. And then I just started following grants. And then just developed a niche in that area, and I've been out of my own for about 9 years now, and I've sort of known you for that long.
Yeah. Now I remember when you left the firm and went on your own, so it was great, and you've been kicking goals ever since. So congratulations on that. And as we've heard throughout all the guests today, there are so many nuances about how to measure your eligibility to apply for it, to create documentation, records, tracking. But what you just mentioned there, Ben, is so powerful. Like, if I ever put on, not that I ever would, if I put on a hat of reading through grant applications, the ones that was short, concise and succinct, I'll be like, okay, yep, put that on the tick box. Because if I have to read through a whole bunch of crap that just goes around in circles, it's going to be quite painful. So there's a lot of power in your expertise around how to package up your applications?
There is. So often I might receive someone's draft application, and it might be 5 pages long, and I don't really get a good sense of who they are.
Yeah.
So then I ask them on the phone, what do you want to do with this grant?
Yeah.
And then I get a much more succinct answer. So people sort of cobble together different parts of a business plan here or a presentation they've done, they cobble it together, but it's not a cohesive and nice, succinct point about who they are.
Yeah, and that's really what, you need to essentially sell your product or your service or your business to the people who are reading that application. So it is very much a way of trying to encapsulate the message, the benefits, because all government grants are basically trying to say, yes, we want to match that benefit, we want to encourage that as an outcome. What are the typical businesses that you work with? I know that we've talked about R&D, we've talked about EMDG with Tom, but you cover the whole breadth of different grants, not just federal and state, but also industry-based, manufacturing-based, which is why Bullet Point is so unique, is that you're almost like, you're the shopping cart of all the grants that are around the place. When
I started 10 years ago, you couldn't really subscribe to a government website to get information. So I started aggregating all the different government websites, putting it all together. I use tools like change detection, so you can measure or look at a website, and if it changes, you get an alert.
Wow, okay.
Another little trick that we have is to use Google Alerts. So whenever that sort of keyword comes up sometime, then I hear about it, I go, great, let's go and put that out there. So I've got a full-time researcher now aggregating all the grants that are out there, and then we send that out a free weekly newsletter with all the new grants that come out. So there's around one a day that comes out.
Really?
So
wow.
There's a lot of grants out there, and most of the time you've only got 6 weeks.
I was going to ask about that application lead time, because that's one of the challenges that I've heard a lot of companies complain about, is like, oh, I just heard about this grant, but the deadline's next week.
That's right. So yeah, you've really got to allow yourself as much time as possible to prepare for a grant. And there's really no secrets to what's going to be in a grant application. So they're 80-90% of a grant application you could write now without actually seeing it.
Really? Wow.
So what you want to know is, what they want to know is who you are, what have you done, what are your products and services, and why are you any good? Why are you believable? Why can they trust you to carry out this grant? So is your business growing? What is your experience in doing a similar activity? And then,
are you a safe bet?
Yeah, so government is very low risk.
Yeah.
So they don't really want to bet on a startup. They prefer to bet on the sure thing. So they're putting a lot of money on the table for these companies, and they don't want to find out in 6 months' time that this business has collapsed or it's wasted the money. They want to bet on the sure thing.
Yeah. With this whole focus now on manufacturing, nationalisation, getting all these things re-fired again in the economy, I'm imagining you're probably been busier than ever with all companies saying to you, look, what am I eligible for, what's out there? Is that what you're experiencing at the moment?
So there's been a bit of an uptrend for people looking for grants, but there's always been a lot of grants in manufacturing. So this has been, you're going back a few years, when the automotive sector was in decline, there was talk of 50,000 workers in Victoria in the second tier. What are we going to do with them? So they invested in other manufacturers to take up that load. So I would see something similar like that would come out in 3 to 6 months' time. So start thinking about what you want to do in 12 to 18 months' time in order to grow your manufacturing facility.
And what about other, like these pop-up things that have happened recently with City Melbourne or Global Business Victoria, and that's just here in Victoria, but obviously other states have got similar type of support packages that have been rolled out. Do you get companies asking you to help with that as well?
Yeah, so the COVID style grants, so that's all about pivoting. So with the money that you get, what are you going to do different?
Right.
So a lot of it's about taking your physical premises and putting it online. So it's about pivoting and being sustainable, because a lot of industries may not open up full up to full scale that they were before COVID. So you've got to pivot to the online. So you might be delivering, you might be a service or a consulting business that did a lot of face-to-face. How do you put that online? How do you develop an education program? How do you do it via distance consulting?
No, it makes sense. I think that again, probably companies have heard about it. It's a bit daunting, overwhelming, as we've heard through the theme of the show. Especially SMEs, they're good at what they do, but to get all this other stuff, it's just it's a totally different skill set. So, how do you normally engage with a company? Do they again, they've probably heard about a grant, then they'll pick up the phone or send you an email saying, look, Ben, can I apply for this? Am I eligible? Is that how it typically starts?
Yeah, so we talk about what the grant is that they want to go for. So one of the main problems with government grants is that they write it so that it looks like everyone's eligible. So the chance of success of getting a grant can be around 30%.
Wow, okay.
So, and I applied for one on Monday, just for myself. The chance of success was 3%.
Wow.
So the main piece of advice I give to companies is don't apply for a grant.
Yeah.
It's not the golden ticket, to transform a bad business.
Yeah.
The government, investing in good businesses and making them great.
Save your time, yeah. Look, it's been absolutely really important to have you on the show. I think you encapsulate a whole range of different programs that we had experts with R&D, with Rita, Tom with the EMDG, and even the analogy you told me in the green room about, even bands could potentially tap into EMDG programs, which is a huge eye opener, especially as an ex-band player myself. There's some really cool ways to talk to you and just be creative about tapping into whatever possible funding there is. So for all of you out there, get in touch with Ben at Bullet Point, who can really just go through like a fine-tooth comb about what your business may or may not be eligible for, and get his advice about what's a waste of time, as you just said as well. So pick your battles and go for the ones that are the best wins for your business. So thanks so much, Ben, and say hi to Alison.
Thanks, Ryan.
And we'll catch up with you very soon.
Awesome.
So today, I hope you found the show really beneficial and educational. We've had some really wonderful experts on the show. We've had Rita Chowry from William Buck talking about the R&D incentive and how that's so important as manufacturing re-emerges. We've had Lauren and Jeff Gray about the importance of audits, compliance, how that not only streamlines your business and improves your eligibility for funding, but also can open up a whole range of customer acquisition and retention programs for you. Then we had Tom Sandlands talking about EMDG and the Export Market Development Grant and why that is are going to be increasingly more important part for Australia as we emerge into a global economy. And then finally with Ben Cusack here at Bullet Point to cover all grants across the spectrum. So hopefully you found that really beneficial. Stay tuned for us next week again on Thursday. Before we go, next Thursday in the afternoon, we do have a really important webinar on cash flow and profit reset as part of the ATLC network. So check out the fantastic speakers we've got. We've got James King from AFX, Phil Smith from the Export Finance Corporation, Matthew Wilson from Pitcher Partners, and Kevin Leong from LendCap. It's a 1-hour webinar, free webinar. Check it out on our website, australiantradelogisticscorporation.com.au, and register for that, and you'll hear some amazing insights about how you can really streamline your cash flow, improve your profitability as we re-emerge post-COVID. So thanks so much everyone for joining me today on Import Export. Have a fantastic week, stay safe, and we'll see you next week here on Thursday. Cheers.
We all have a big idea.
When I was a kid, I actually wanted to be a builder. Everyone working outside, music playing.
When I was a kid, I wanted to be an ice cream man who offered free refills.
But what does it really take to be an entrepreneur?
You got to have balls.
To be a startup founder, it's definitely not for everyone. It's insanely challenging.
No, balls and brains.
A brand new show to inspire bright ideas.
Being really determined and resilient to make it happen.
The show is for people in our position, in the trenches, trying to build a brand.
The real story about startup life from the guys who founded Bay Juice.
The best day of our life with Bay Juice is when Dan Murphy's called us to say we're going to trial your product in store.
There's an insane amount of challenges, but we always see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Ticker Launch with Liam Gostenik and Tim O'Sullivan. Every week on Ticker.
Hey, good morning. Ticker's new breakfast show.
Well, most of the time in the morning, I annoy people.
I think Ben is so fabulous. He is wild, he is warm, he is witty.
The first time I met Alana, I realised I wanted to have a drink with her.
You never know what's going to come out of his mouth.
Kick off your morning with Ticker Jumpstart.
We are playing in uncharted territory.
This preparation takes me all night.
It doesn't matter how long I take, because Ben will always take longer.
Ticker Jumpstart with Benjamin Norris and Alana McLean.
You're going to get some different stuff with us, and we're going to be unapologetic for it.
You do realise it's the morning, so you don't need to be the human coffee.
There are now more ways to watch Ticker. Download our apps for Apple and Android devices. We're live on Twitter and YouTube Live. And you can catch us on Amazon Alexa and Google Home. Head to the Ticker website for more. Introducing Ticker Sport.
Mate, how exciting is it to kick off Ticker Sport?
Mate, I'm as pumped as you, which is pretty pumped. We're here to talk sport, business, there's a market, there's a niche.
It's David Davidovich and Adrian Franklin tackling the biggest issues.
Mate, we're talking sport, but we're talking business as well. And as you know, right now, there is no more important time. The world has changed and we are here to react.
Where nothing's off limits.
This is unprecedented. We've never seen sport ground to a halt like it has. Sport's heading in a completely different direction and we will be at the forefront.
Every Friday, live on Ticker and on demand via the Ticker apps.
Ben, Rob and Robbo. Streaming across the globe, Ben Norris, Rob McKnight and David Robinson. Ben, Rob and Robbo. News and views, entertainment news. It's the Ben, Rob and Robbo. Ben, Rob and Robbo Show. Ben, Rob and Robbo Show. The Ben, Rob and Robbo Show, Monday to Thursday at 1 p.m, right here on Ticker TV.
Community has been hit hard by the impacts of coronavirus, but with it comes opportunity too. Ticker brings you the latest information and interviews with startup founders about how to survive and ways to grow. Head to the Ticker website or download the Ticker apps.